The cloud and the rain will keep the temperatures up into the teens in many spots, but the far north of Scotland stays clear of the rain and it will be a cooler start to the day here. Actually, the north of Scotland sees the best of the weather on Wednesday. Sunny spells and feeling warm in places, but slow-moving area of rain across central Scotland. A lot of low cloud here will make it feel on the cool side. Northern Ireland seeing some heavy showers. Northern England, slow-moving showers as well. Tricky driving conditions. Further south, some lively downpours also across central and southern England as well as Wales, but these will move through with a bit more of a pace because of a stronger breeze. Now, the showers and the longer spells of rain tend to ease overnight. Thursday starts off relatively dry in many places before further rain in the west later. Then it turns increasingly windy.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, and the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. It's the day after the night before and that confidence vote. Boris Johnson won, but is he fatally wounded? Our political editor will bring us the latest and we'll ask a pro-Boris Johnson Conservative MP how the Prime Minister can unite the party. We're talking to voters in Uxbridge and Wakefield and we're discussing access to GPs and suicide prevention. But first, it's your news with Rosie.
Good afternoon, it's just 1 minute past 12. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister has told his Cabinet the government will deliver tax cuts to help with economic growth, vowing to deliver on what matters to the public. Boris Johnson thanked his Cabinet for their support during last night's vote, where 148 Conservative MPs said they didn't have confidence in his leadership. The Prime Minister told ministers that the government is now going to focus on COVID recovery, inflation and rising energy prices.
Thank you, by the way, everybody, for all your good work yesterday, because which was a very important day, because we were able now to draw a line under the issues that our opponents want to talk about, and we are able to get on with talking about what I think the people in this country want us to talk about, which is what we are doing to help them.
Speaking to reporters this morning, the Conservative MP, Andrea Leadsom, wouldn't commit to saying whether Johnson is the right person to lead the party into the next election.
The party gave its views yesterday, and today is another day we move on, and I know the Prime Minister will want to focus on absolutely the priorities of this country.
So he's the right man to lead the party into the next election?
That's it, thanks.
Conservative MP Greg Smith, who voted in favour of Boris Johnson, told us the government needs to focus on the priorities of the people and not itself.
Last night, 60% of the parliamentary party, which is a decisive margin, uncomfortable as the 40% is a decisive margin. The parliamentary party now needs to rally behind the Prime Minister, accept that result, and get on with doing the things we were elected to do. Let's not tear each other apart. Let's have the debate on exactly how we are delivering for the British people, not about personalities.
Polling expert Sir John Curtis told us Boris Johnson has lost public support.
The honest truth is he would be out on his ear by more or less the reverse of the result of the Conservative ballot. We actually had 3 opinion polls yesterday morning in the wake of the announcement that the ballot was going to take place. They found 60% of people saying that the Prime Minister should resign. That's exactly the same as what the polls were saying in the immediate wake of the publication of the Sue Gray report.
3/4 of UK consumers say the cost of food is a major future concern. The Food Standards Agency says the number of people using a food bank has jumped from 1 in 10 to nearly 1 in 6 since last year. They say 22% of those surveyed in March skipped meals because they didn't have enough money to buy food. Russia's defence minister says 2 Ukrainian ports, which were seized by Russian forces, have been demined and are ready to resume grain shipments. It's after Ukraine accused Russia of stealing vital grain supplies. That's something the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, believes is credible. Moscow claims the lack of grain shipments is due to Western sanctions. International food agencies have warned that without Ukraine's grain, the effect on food security globally could be catastrophic. Major General Chip Chapman told GB News Russia's using Ukraine's grain as a political tool.
They are weaponising grain supplies as a means of trying to get leverage over Ukraine in the international community, ultimately. And we must, in my view, we've got to hold the line and support Ukraine and not weaken in a sort of appeasing moment saying you've got to go for a ceasefire, Ukraine, because food prices are going up.
There's no consistency on how patients with long COVID are being treated across the UK. It's the analysis of the Royal College of Nursing who say NHS care for the infection is currently inadequate and that diagnosis and treatment varies hugely. Long COVID is being treated by some clinics as a physical condition, but mainly as a psychological condition by others. Absences due to mental health in Scotland's police officers have risen by 22% in the past 5 years. Figures from Scotland's Justice and Social Affairs publication shows that staff missed almost 77,000 days last year as a result of psychological disorders. The Scottish Police Federation chairman, David Hamilton, told GB News officers are under critical stress levels.
The reason for that is that policing is very much that service of last resort. It's where people come to when everything else fails, and people retreating back into their own core business, and police officers are left having to essentially pick up pieces and help members of the community. It's a complex mix here, so there is this traumatic experiences that we have to deal with, and the types of things that we have to see, smell, hear. It's all very traumatic.
Now, if you use an Apple phone, you'll be able to edit and even unsend text messages in a new software update to be released later this year. The company have also announced an update to Apple Pay, which allows people to split the cost of a purchase into multiple payments over a 6-week period. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the briefing with Gloria.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, Boris Johnson is urging Conservative MPs to unite and move on. But when 41% of his MPs voted against him last night, is it just wishful thinking, or can he defy expectations again? I'll have the latest from our political editor outside Downing Street. Conservative MP and Boris Johnson backer Richard Fuller joins me. I'll ask him what the Prime Minister needs to do now, and we'll also be talking about access to GPs. When did you last see your doctor, and how easy was it to get an appointment? And we're asking voters what they make of the vote. Do they support the Prime Minister and want the party to get behind him, or do they still think that he needs to go? We'll be in Boris Johnson's constituency of Uxbridge and in Wakefield, where, of course, there's a by-election on June the 23rd. And despite the squabbling, MPs are busy in Parliament working on all sorts of things that matter. I'll talk with Labour MP Kerry McCarthy about suicide prevention. Give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at GBNews. So, Boris Johnson survived a vote of no confidence last night, but appears wounded after a larger proportion of his own MPs than many expected voted against him. After a 2-hour ballot of Conservative MPs, the chairman of the parliamentary party announced the result at 9 o'clock last night.
The vote in favour of having confidence in Boris Johnson as leader was 211 votes, and the vote against was 148 votes. And therefore, I can announce that the parliamentary party does have confidence.
Well, this morning, senior Conservatives, both critics of the PM and supporters, were pounced on by the media for their reaction.
Good morning. Can we ask, is this the beginning of the end for Boris Johnson?
I think he's won the vote comprehensively and we're just getting on with the business.
Does he then have your support? Does the party need to unite behind him?
The party gave its views yesterday and today is another day we move on, and I know the Prime Minister will want to focus on absolutely the priorities of this country.
So he's the right man to lead the party into the next election?
That's it, thanks.
Good morning. Sorry, I don't have any comments to make,
Are you
but
still
I'll try
running
not
for
to run you
party
over.
leadership?
Thanks.
Are you still running for the leadership?
Morning, sir. What do you make of the result? Where does this leave the Conservative Party? Are you still keen on the job?
Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is at Westminster. Darren, bring us up to date.
Well, as you just saw there, didn't you, from the Cabinet meeting this morning, the Prime Minister trying to say that the Conservative Party needs to draw a line under all of this, that they need to move on and focus on what he said is the issues that matter to the public. And I suspect we're going to see an awful lot, actually, of policy initiatives in the days and weeks to come. We know, Gloria, there's a big speech planned between him and the Chancellor on Thursday, talking about the economy and about housing. The Prime Minister really keen to focus on housing at the moment, and I suspect we'll also see the Conservative Party become a bit more conservative in many ways, that the government may well look at things like tax and spending, particularly on this issue of tax cuts, something that many Conservative MPs want to see not next year but rather brought forward to this year to help with the cost of living crisis, rather than necessarily just spending more money. So in many ways, Boris Johnson is going to have to try and appease and win back many of those Conservative MPs who voted against him, and he will try and do that in the days and weeks to come. But the big problem is, frankly, he is politically wounded by all of this. 41% of his own MPs, probably almost certainly a majority of backbenchers, those not on the payroll of the government, do not have confidence in his leadership, and that is going to be very, very tricky for the Prime Minister. Lord Hague, of course the former Foreign Secretary this morning, William Hague, saying that it's a big problem, that he reckons his leadership is no longer viable. He puts it like this, Gloria, he said, "This is very difficult to proceed as a party leader in the long term. This is like trying to drive down the M1 with two flat tires. You can say you're at the steering wheel, but is it really viable? Are you going to get to the end of the motorway?" And I think that's the sense among many Conservative MPs, that while the Prime Minister did, of course, survive yesterday, just how tenable is that in the long term? Andrew Leadsom, of course, one of those rebels, when probed, when asked about whether he would be leader at the next election, wouldn't go as far as saying that he would or should be, though she accepted that things needed to move on. And there are other challenges, Gloria, of course, ahead for the Prime Minister. We've got those two crucial by-elections in Wakefield and in Tiverton in a couple of weeks' time, it is entirely possible the Conservative Party could lose both of those seats to Labour in the north and to the Lib Dems in the southwest. And again, that may well bring things to a head, if you like. And in addition to that, we know that the Privileges Committee in Parliament, Gloria, are carrying out a report into whether the Prime Minister misled Parliament. Again, if they were to find against the Prime Minister, that would be very, very tricky indeed. So, yes, the Prime Minister wants to move on, and I think there is a sense within the Conservative Party, at least in the immediate term, there will be a breathing space for the government to move on. The question is, will that be the case in a couple of months' time, in 6 months' time, in a year's time? And that is why I think for the Prime Minister this is going to be a very, very difficult period ahead, simply because when you've got 4 out of every 10 of your own MPs saying they don't have confidence in your leadership, that is going to be a drag on any leadership, not at least one that faces challenges in the weeks and months to come.
Thank you so much to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey there. Well, throughout this debate, we've been hearing different voices from within the Conservative, those who are loyal to the Prime Minister and those who have lost the confidence in him. I'm joined in the studio now by Conservative MP Richard Fuller, who backed Boris Johnson last night. Hello.
Hello.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
He can't survive this in the long term, can he?
Yes, of course he can. And he can do that by focusing on the millions of people who in the last election, some for the very first time, put their X next to the Conservative name because of Boris Johnson. All those people who, when they look at the elite of this country, know there's only one person that they can trust to be on their side. Now, the Prime Minister can't always guarantee he's got their support, but he needs to focus on their interests, and that way, yes, he can survive and he can win the next election.
What do you say to Lord Hague, William Hague, your former party leader? It's like Prime Minister driving with 2 flat tyres.
I don't know when Lord Hague was driving down the M1 on a car with 2 flat tyres. I've never done that. But, you know, I think if his metaphor is the Prime Minister is in that situation, I would say, stop the car, change a couple of tyres, Prime Minister, and carry on. And that, to me, is another part of what's important. The Prime Minister's got to be much more focused. He's doing lots and lots of really good things, but that clarity about what the real rationale of this government is about has been, I think, knocked a bit sideways by COVID. Quite rightly, we did lots of things that perhaps weren't originally the focus. He has now got to focus. He's got to make some hard choices in doing that, particularly around public spending, and get back to the principles and the priorities worked in the manifesto in 2019.
The rebels will come for him again if those 2 by-elections are lost, surely?
Well, I thought it was, I'd rather, compared to your Mr. McCaffrey, I thought that Angela Leadsom was actually quite permissive about the support for the Prime Minister. We need to move on. I think she's absolutely right about that. I lived in Australia for a while, and Australia, they call these leadership spills. And Australia got in the habit of doing these every 3 months, really, and it's very debilitating for leadership. And so what I'd say to my Conservative colleagues is learn that Australian lesson, but also learn our own lesson. That you can be masters of your own future, your own destiny. We have a significant majority. We've still got 2 years, more than 2 years, till the next election needs to be called. Let's get delivering behind those priorities. That's what we should be focusing on. The public don't like divided parties, so don't be divided.
OK, you have hot-footed it to us from a debate that you have just led in Parliament, which lots of our viewers will be interested in. It was a debate on GPs. Just tell us, because in these debates you put your case to the minister responsible. What is it that you wanted to say?
So I've spent the last 6 months talking to GPs because I wanted to do it right at the start, but COVID came in, and my real priority was there's been so much housing development across my constituency, from Arlesey and Stotfold in the south, through Biggleswade up to Potton Sandy, and even in the north of my constituency. And in fact, the minister today, in her constituency, she had similar issues. But it's also because of coming out of COVID, and we've had so much in our mailbags, all MPs from constituents said, I just can't get through on the phone. It's really, very debilitating to be asked to do the same. Phone, can't get through. Try again tomorrow at 8 o'clock. So talking to GPs, there were some clear issues that came out. The choice of phone system, something as simple as that could make a big difference about whether people feel comfortable with the service they get. The way in which a practice manager, that human contact, often we had people who couldn't get through, they came to the practice, they couldn't be let in. The way that situation was handled was really rather important. But also we need to do more to get GPs in and to make people happy. Sometimes you may not see a GP, you might see a paramedic. We went through all these topics and more with the Minister today, and I was really rather pleased by her response.
Some people would say, your critics would say, that the shortage of GPs, which it was one of your points, has happened under your watch. Jeremy Hunt, when he was Health Secretary, has been in the news lately for other reasons. He pledged to increase the number of GPs by, a number of thousand, but the number of GPs has actually fallen.
It has, and more worrying, in my constituency, and actually the number of GPs has got about 2%. The years I was looking at was 2014 to 2022, because that's the longest coherent data set that you can get from the NHS. In that period, the number of GPs have gone up 2%, but the number of GP partners, which is what maybe has gone down by about 20%.
Right.
It's actually been
GP partners, just put that in nominal.
So a GP partner, there are three levels of you can be a GP, broadly speaking. I think it's probably a fourth, but there can be a locum. That GP comes in and decides the hours she or he wishes to work, and the practice can hire them for those hours. There's then a GP who is salaried, and he or she essentially works, and I'll say 9 to 5, I'm sure they work longer hours than that, but that is their duty, is to do those hours. And then a GP partner essentially is where they run the business of being a GP. So they might be responsible, in addition for seeing patients, for making sure that the payroll is sorted out at the end of the month, for HR issues, for sorting out contracts for premises, etc. It's like running your own business. And that's the bit which I was saying to the Minister today, those GP partners, they're not getting that additional remuneration. In fact, you're better off not doing those extra hours and extra work as a partner, or even doing all hours of the week. You get paid more per hour if you pick and choose your hours as a locum. That's the wrong way around. And the government needs to look at the reward systems for GPs so that they can reinforce the model they want. If the government wants to say, we like partner GPs, which I think is great. I love entrepreneurs. I love people who have want to go that extra yard. If they want to do that, they've got to look at the remuneration systems. The Minister made the point, it's not all in her control, and she's right. There's some legacy issues, but it does need attention.
So lots of people will be pleased that you are campaigning on this. For those struggling at the moment to get a GP appointment, or one that's face-to-face, how much longer will it go on for? When are you going to get your way? When's it going to be improved?
Well, I think some of it is sort of improving because we've come out of that COVID period, which was a tremendous pinch point, but lots of people had anxieties, and we've discovered lots of things where people hadn't come forward and they were at later stages of diagnoses. So even from my own postbag, I can see that it's getting a little bit better. But the numbers have got to move faster, and it's not just GPs. And again, the Minister, Maggie Throop, today, she was very clear that it's the paramedics, it's the nurse practitioners, it is the other direct patient care. You can go and see other people when you're in primary care. So yes, we need to increase the number of GPs. The government's working on that, but you're right, they're not moving fast enough. But on that other area, good progress is being made. We've got to learn that sometimes the best answer when you make the call is not to see your GP, it might be to see another qualified medical professional.
Final question. Yes or no? Is Boris Johnson going to lead you into the next election?
Yes.
Perfectly simple answer. Thank you very much indeed for coming in and chat to us straight from that debate. Thank you, Richard Fuller. After the break, we'll be going to Wakefield, where a by-election will be held on the 23rd of June. How did last night's no-confidence vote go down in that area? Before that, let's take a look at your weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Dry and bright for many of us today, but not for all. There will be some showers in the south. However, away from the showers, it's going to feel warm in many places. One area of low pressure is moving away. Another one is approaching for later in the day. A deeper one is approaching for later in the week to bring a windy spell Thursday, Friday and Saturday. But in the meantime, in between these lows, a lot of cloud for many, especially for southern parts of the country where we've started off with some light rain and drizzle, and another area of cloud feeding into eastern parts of northern England. But Scotland sees plenty of sunny spells. Central parts of England also sunny spells, and where we get the sunshine, 22 Celsius is possible. Warm again also for western Scotland, but showers will form in places, and some more prolonged showery rain pushes in from the southwest through the evening. Now that spreads into Northern Ireland. Much of England and Wales sees a couple of hours of rain, heavy at times, before it pushes into central and southern Scotland by dawn. And the cloud and the rain will keep the temperatures up into the teens in many spots, but the far north of Scotland, stays clear of the rain, and it will be a cooler start to the day here. Actually, the north of Scotland sees the best of the weather on Wednesday. Sunny spells and feeling warm in places, but slow-moving area of rain across central Scotland. A lot of low cloud here will make it feel on the cool side. Northern Ireland seeing some heavy showers. Northern England, slow-moving showers as well. Tricky driving conditions. Further south, some lively downpours also across central and southern England as well as Wales, but these will move through with a bit more of a pace because of a stronger breeze. Now, the showers and the longer spells of rain tend to ease overnight. Thursday starts off relatively dry in many places before further rain in the west later. Then it turns increasingly windy.
I'm Darren McCaffrey, and join me on The Briefing Monday to Thursday at 3 p.m. You'll get your afternoon fix of all the latest political stories, debate and analysis, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names in UK politics.
It's a problem that affects the whole world, Darren.
From Westminster to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, if it's happening in UK politics, we've got it covered. That's The Briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, Monday to Thursday, 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Wakefield will have a by-election on the 23rd of June. This was sparked when former Conservative MP Imran Ahmed Khan resigned after being convicted of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy and jailed for 18 months. The West Yorkshire constituency has a Tory majority of just 3,358, having turned blue for the first time in 87 years in 2019. After last night's no-confidence vote, has it made some people change their mind, or will the Tories be able to hold on to the seat? Joining me from Wakefield is our Yorkshire reporter, Anna Riley. Anna, what's the mood like there?
Good afternoon, Gloria. It's really rather indifferent here, the mood, after that confidence vote. The Labour have been tipped to win this by-election, Conservatives coming second, but who knows what will happen on June the 23rd. But certainly speaking to people this morning, they've told me that their opinion of Boris Johnson hasn't changed either way, whether they love him or they loathe him. Here's what people had to say.
I think the thing is, like, whatever he's done and how he's been blamed for these party and things like that, get it out of the road, get it done with. Don't concern me one little bit, really.
No, not really. I don't think he's bad, really. But I've always been a Labour man, but Starmer's not the man for me. Before the start, I know they won't get him out because everybody likes him. You know what I mean? I know he's been an idiot, and he's been fine and all that. But I knew last night they won't get him out because he's a likeable fella, isn't he? You know what I mean? And everybody's tried to put him down. And the more people try to put him down, the more he bounces back, doesn't he? So he'll be there till the end of his reign. You know what I mean?
Has the confidence vote changed your perception?
No.
And why not?
Because he's all right.
What do you think to Boris Johnson?
Good.
I do believe in giving second chances, you know what I mean, but I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Has it changed anything, this vote of confidence in his party?
No.
And why not?
I just think he's an idiot.
So a real mix of views there, some people supporting Boris Johnson, others not so much, but certainly people telling me that that confidence vote hasn't done anything to change their minds in this upcoming by-election on June the 23rd. Let's see what happens.
Really interesting voices you brought to us there, Anna Riley. Thank you so much. There are 15 candidates standing in Wakefield. They are Nadeem Ahmed for the Conservatives, Afek Akbar, who's independent, Paul Bickerdike from the Christian People's Alliance, Mick Dodgson of the Freedom Alliance, Jada Franson, an independent, Jordan Gaskell for the UK Independence Party, David Hurdson of the Yorkshire Party, Therese Hurst from the English Democrats, Christopher Jones, the Northern Independence Party, Simon Lightwood for Labour, Jamie Needle from the Liberal Democrats, Ash Routh of the Green Party, Ashley Simon from Britain First, Sir Archibald Stanton Earl Eaton from the official Monster Raving Loony Party, and Chris Walsh from Reform UK. Well, our reporter Alice Porter is down in Boris Johnson's seat of Uxbridge asking voters what they think of their local MP. Should he stay as PM? The Prime Minister won the vote of no confidence last night, but what does that mean for his premiership? I'll be joined by political journalists Andrew Pearce and Kevin Maguire, and we're discussing the urgent need for better mental health support with Labour MP Kerry McCarthy. That's all after your news update with Rosie.
Good afternoon. It's coming up to 12:30. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister has told his cabinet the government will deliver tax cuts to help with economic growth, vowing to focus on what matters to the public. Boris Johnson thanked his cabinet for their support after he saw off a vote of confidence in his premiership where 148 Conservative MPs did not back the Prime Minister.
Thank you, by the way, everybody, for all your good work yesterday, because which was a very important day, because we were able now to draw a line under the issues that our opponents want to talk about, and we're able to get on with talking about what I think the people in this country want us to talk about, which is what we are doing to help them.
3/4 of UK consumers say the cost of food is a major future concern. The Food Standards Agency says the number of people using a food bank has jumped from 1 in 10 to nearly 1 in 6 since last year. They say 22% of those surveyed in March skipped meals because they didn't have enough money to buy food. In Ukraine, fierce street fighting continues in Severodonetsk in the east as Russia steps up its drive to capture one of the largest remaining Ukrainian-held cities in the Donbass region. President Zelensky says despite being outnumbered, Ukrainian forces have every chance of fighting back in the region.
We have a difficult situation in the east. You know the situation in Severodonetsk. We are maintaining the situation. They outnumber us. They are more powerful. But, nevertheless, I think we have every chance to fight.
Now, if you use an Apple phone, you'll be able to edit and even unsend text messages in a new software update to be released later this year. The company have also announced an update to Apple Pay, which allows people to split the cost of a purchase into multiple payments over a 6-week period. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. The Briefing and Gloria will be back shortly.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So last night's vote might change the history of British politics, or it might not. We'll just have to wait and see. Boris Johnson is the Member of Parliament for Uxbridge and Ruislip. And with the cost of living soaring, the Partygate saga, and now this no-confidence vote, which he won, what do his constituents make of the man who represents them? Our reporter, Alice Porter, is at in Boris Johnson's constituency, and she spoke to the people there. What's happening, Alice?
Hello there. Yes, I was actually here yesterday evening before the vote. I've been here all of today speaking with people, and I have to say one of the things that has really struck me is how many people support the Prime Minister. I've had so many people coming up to me and saying how much that they like Boris Johnson. Now, in some ways, that perhaps isn't surprising. I mean, this has been a very safe Tory seat ever since it was created in 2010. And I think it's important to stress that even if the Prime Minister had lost last night's vote, he still would stay on as the MP for Uxbridge and Ruislip. But even amongst some of his most loyal supporters that I've been speaking to today, many of them have also been recognising that perhaps, given last night's votes with so many Tory rebels going against the Prime Minister, that perhaps his political days are numbered. This is what they said to me.
In the beginning, when he started, he was doing some good things, but now he's doing a lot of mistakes, and I think this COVID or this lockdown party was the last mistake for me. He should be what's the word, dismissed, or should be removed, but they gave a board to stay, but I think he will not stay for long or all in the elections. Probably he will not win the next elections.
I think it's very doubtful that he can survive this. I really do, because he there's too many voting against him for him to be a credible leader anymore. The party's obviously disunited at the moment. And
I think he let the country down, and at the time that everyone who stayed at home and they were trying to protect each other by isolating themselves, he was partying. And a lot of people, they say, okay, vaccination and everything, but that's not all. He just let people down completely, because he was encouraging people not to go out, but at the same time he was partying, and it's just unbelievable.
So Boris Johnson's still got your vote?
always. If they try and get him out, I will not vote at all. I won't vote for Lib Dems, Green Party, Labour, definitely not Labour anyway, or even Tories then. No. They have a mandate to get rid of somebody they don't like. It's all about like and dislike. All right, he does stretch the truth a bit, but all of them do.
There were some people in Uxbridge who were speaking to me this morning. And so you've got quite a range of views there. But I think one thing that actually really struck me when I was speaking with quite a few of them is many supported Boris Johnson on a sort of national scale and support him as a Prime Minister. But a lot of them were frustrated with him as a constituency MP. And I think some of that is down to the fact of the difficulties of when you have a Prime Minister who's also your local MP. And many of them sort of feel he's not involved with local issues, that he's not been to hustings, and quite frustrated with that. And I think that could be something that could come back to bite Boris Johnson in the ballot box. I mean, it's a couple of years until we've got a general election, so in some ways that very much goes in his favour given the events over the last 24 hours. But I think it's important to stress that speaking with the people here, it's important not to forget your local constituents, because it could come back to bite you in the ballot box.
Really interesting voices. Thank you for bringing them to us. Alice Porter, thank you. So the Prime Minister wants his party to unite and move on, but with 41% of his own MPs voting to remove him last night, is that really possible? Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by two veteran political journalists, Andrew Pearce, consultant editor at The Mail, and Kevin Maguire, associate editor at The Mirror. Hello, gentlemen. I am assured that they are about to appear. They're a fantastic duo, these two, both from different political traditions, should we say, but entertaining. So we're going to start with Kevin Maguire, who we can... Hello, Kevin. How are you?
Gloria, how are you doing?
Extremely good and decisive result, which enables us to win. A win is a win, isn't it?
There is such a thing as a bad win. And that was a worse win than Theresa May's at the end of 2018, middle of 2019. She was gone and replaced by Boris Johnson. He will know that. They are very, very disappointed that 148 Conservative MPs, 42% of the total majority of backbenchers voted against him, leaving him relying on the payroll vote to survive. And look, they lost that vote, but they're not defeated. And he's got further bad times ahead with the Tiverton and Wakefield by-elections, June 23rd, later this month. Cost of living crisis isn't going away. And I was watching the pictures from the cabinet meeting. He invited in the TV cameras to try and show the country that he's fizzing full of energy. It looked like he was running on empty, and the cabinet looked very morose. They know he's in serious trouble.
Do you think the Cabinet, who have been meeting this morning, as you say, do you think they might... Oh, hello, Andrew. I'm going to bring Andrew in now. He can't survive this, can he? Not in the long term, Andrew.
Do you know what, Gloria? I would have said if it was any other Tory leader or politician, probably not. This is not a guy with a cat with 9 lives. He's got 99. And there's a big difference between him and Theresa May. Look, of course, she got 63% of the vote. She was gone 6 months later. But the reason she was gone was because she did not have a deal to get us out of the European Union. There's no big policy gap between Boris Johnson and his backbenchers. It's a personality thing. It's a character issue. The other big difference as well, Gloria, is that Theresa May went to the country in 2017 with a 20-point lead in the opinion polls and managed to lose the Tories' first overall majority since 1992. If she'd had any honour, she'd have resigned immediately then. Instead, she limped on for another two years until finally the Tory party had enough of her. They knew she couldn't get Brexit done. They knew that she didn't have her heart in it. Boris Johnson believed in Brexit. He delivered Brexit in the referendum and he got Brexit done. So that's why I think Tories, he might survive. Don't forget also, he did deliver them their biggest majority since 1987, just 2 and a bit years ago. A really stonking majority, an 80-seat majority, the biggest for the Tories since Mrs. Thatcher in 1987. So he will argue that he still can turn it on when it matters. He's got a lot of work to do, though. I'm not denying that. And it was a very, very disappointing result if you're a supporter of Boris Johnson. They should have kept that number of rebel MPs below 100. In fact, if it had gone above 150, I think he'd have been toppled on the spot.
Well, Kevin, I mean, he attended some leaving parties briefly as part of his job. Andrew's point is that he's the most successful Tory leader electorally since Thatcher. Not going to get rid of him, surely.
Yeah, and Andrew, who in his house has a shrine to Margaret Thatcher, including a life-sized cardboard cutout of the woman clutching her handbag, will know that Thatcher gave the Tories a 102-seat majority in 1987. She was gone in 3 years because she'd gone from hero to zero. She'd become an electoral liability, and that's what's happened to Boris Johnson. December 2019, yep, he was a winner then, but he's not a winner now. He is tainted. He is toxic. He will not get back what has gone before. Brexit's disappearing in a rear-view mirror. Whoever replaces him will not unpick Brexit. They might keep the protocol, but they're not going to unpick Brexit. The fact is, he ain't a vote winner anymore. We saw it in the council elections, when the Tories lost very heavily, nearly 500 seats. I think we'll see it in the 2 by-elections this month. You see it in the opinion polls time after time after time. You can't motivate them now. It's different. And, of course, it's not really whether he had a bit of birthday cake or not. It's all about whether a rule maker makes the rules, expects the rules to follow them, but then gives himself a free card to ignore them. And they're booing at the Jubilee when he was with his wife, Carrie, and you could hear the booing, and yes, there were some cheers, but that is unprecedented. That was a flag-waving monarchist crowd, a crowd you would normally expect to be conservative to its core. It wasn't. That symbolised a break between his popularity and the country. It's gone. It's just it. It's not. It ain't coming back. It happens to parties. It happens to politicians. That is it. The Tory MPs can save themselves or can save Boris Johnson, but they can't do both.
Well, look, on Mrs. Thatcher, can I just say, you can't compare the two. She'd been in power for 11 and a half years. People were exhausted by her. She'd sacked so many people. She hadn't promoted so many people. So she'd made a lot of enemies. Boris has barely been Prime Minister for 3 years. And you can't characterise everybody outside St Paul's Cathedral as Conservative voters because they were there to give thanks to the Queen for a lifetime of service. Kevin may not realise this because he's such an avowed Republican, but lots of Labour Party members and lots of Labour Party voters, many of whom read the Daily Mirror, love the monarchy, love the Queen, and some of those could well have been outside St Paul's Cathedral. It's ridiculous to say they would all have been Tories through and through. Absolutely not the case whatsoever. I accept it was difficult to hear booing of the Prime Minister, but there was some cheering. But I accept again the booing was louder. That could well have been Kevin Maguire's mates who support the monarchy, unlike him.
Cheering for Tony Blair when he arrived. Keir Starmer, it must be said, seemed to go in unnoticed and on
They didn't know who he is.
You will know.
They don't know who he is.
You will know, Andrew, that was not a crowd of revolutionary Robespierres wanting the heads of anybody. They went along there to have a good time and cheer people along. And when the Prime Minister got out, they resent the fact that he broke the rules they were expected to follow. Look, he's the first Prime Minister in history to be found to have broken the law in office. He's being fined. You can try and trivialise it as much as you like, but most people are pretty decent and they follow the law and they want their rulers to follow the law, particularly the laws they make. He did not. It's gone. This is before we get on to his inability to do anything about the cost of living crisis. And the problem for the Conservative Party now is when they do something, which they did a few weeks ago with what Johnson called the big bazooka of £21 billion being spent, including doubling energy rebates to £400. Or if you have 2 or 3 houses, you'll get £800 or £1,200, a slightly separate issue, but it's wrong in principle. But the fact is, he got no political credit for it because people have taken against him.
If Kevin could stop talking just for a second, the reason there'll be no immediate political bounce for Boris Johnson and the Tories from the £21 billion big bazooka is because it's not in people's pocket yet. They don't get the money until October. That's when they'll start to get the political benefits. And there will be another budget, probably in October rather than November, and there'll be even more help on cost of living. They'll cut taxes. They should never have put national insurance up in the first place, in my view. And don't forget, they can borrow, and they'll borrow more. I'm not one of those who thinks we should be borrowing vast amounts of money, but Boris Johnson is not the cat with 9 lives. He's the cat with 99 lives, and he hasn't used up all of them just yet.
Let me ask you both. Let me ask you for your thoughts, because you have decades of political experience between you. Where do you think the rebels go next, Kevin? What's the next move? Or will they, shut up for a bit?
No, I think we saw one of them, Tobias Elwood, saying he would like to see the 1922 committee, that's the backbench committee, change the rules. So there can be a challenge within a year to Boris Johnson. I think what will happen is you get the by-election results at the end of the month. It'll be Friday the 24th when we discuss them. Wakefield's almost certainly gone because of the circumstances. The Conservative MPs being jailed for molesting a teenager. That was a red wall seat taken from Labour. You would expect it to go back. In one way, you lose that. It's not a big disaster. The key is Tiverton down in Devon. It's a blue wall seat, 24,000 majority. That should be a Tory citadel. It's a bigger majority than North Shropshire and Cheshire and Amersham, which were both lost to the Liberal Democrats. I think if that goes, you will see a renewed effort for Johnson to go, and you will, I think, hear calls in the cabinet for him to go, because they will then just see the writing on the wall. If he clings on by a vote, then he might buy himself a bit of time, but he's wounded, he's staggering. I think Labour recognise, and I spoke to six prominent Labour people yesterday, 3 in the shadow cabinet, and 5 of the 6 all thought it was best if Boris Johnson stays for them, because they can see that he just hasn't got the old magic. He's not the winner that he used to be. They face a fresh face at the next election. That'll be more difficult than facing somebody who will be easy to take apart in debates and confrontations. No problem. We saw in May that the only parties that had Boris Johnson on their leaflets were Labour and the Liberal Democrats.
Andrew, final thought from you. Where do the rebels go next, if anywhere?
Well, it depends if in the next 3 or 4 weeks before that by-election we get the result of what do we call it, Durhamgate or Beergate, and if Keir Starmer and his deputy, who seem to forget that she was in a room for a very long time in Durham, if they told the police say they've broken the rules and they're not fined, that's a big problem for them. If they're fined, they resign. That's going to throw the whole political situation into chaos. The by-elections, of course, they're going to be difficult. If they lose Tiverton, I can already hear the Prime Minister's excuse. The reason they lost is because the ghastly MP who was there before resigned because he was at home watching pornography in the House of Commons chamber. I defend the right of anybody to watch pornography, but really in the House of Commons chamber, gross. So there are special extenuating circumstances, but the only way the rebels can make any leeway is if cabinet ministers start to peel away and to resign. That's what did for Mrs. Thatcher back in 1990. Indeed. The cabinet said they'd lost control in her, but so far he's got the cabinet with him for now.
Gentlemen, I love watching you. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show. Come back again soon, and thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria.
Cheers. Now, suicide is the biggest killer of young people and indeed of men under the age of 50. The pandemic has caused a surge in demand for mental health support, but waiting lists are long and too often the help just isn't there. Joining me now is Kerry McCarthy, Labour MP for Bristol East, who is leading a debate in Parliament tomorrow on this very subject and joins us now. Kerry, it's a very personal reason why you talk about this a lot, why you're campaigning on this, while you have a debate tomorrow in Parliament. Tell us about that reason.
Well, it's partly, obviously, as any MP would be. I've been concerned about mental health services since I got elected 17 years ago, with stories about people put on waiting lists, not being able to get the beds that they need, being sent, children being sent hundreds of miles away from home when they are struggling with things like eating disorders. So it was very much on my radar. But yes, in November last year, my friend Rick took his own life. And in some ways, there was a degree, well, I won't say it was inevitable because, I would like to think that, perhaps if other things, certain things had happened at certain times, then he could have been saved. But, he had a difficult childhood. He spent time in care. He joined the army at 16 and saw some pretty horrific things, serving in Bosnia in the First Gulf War. And then he experienced 20 years of poor mental health once he left the army. So, and we were shocked that it happened, but in some ways, looking at it with hindsight, it certainly wasn't unexpected.
Yeah, we're all sorry for your loss, Kerry. You've already had an event in Parliament on this as part of your campaign, not just with politicians, but with members of New Order and Joy Division. Tell us why you brought New Order.
Well, actually, I mean, they're my favourite band, as I've said. And I sort of got to know them a little bit a few years ago. And this was just something we started talking about. So this was before Rick's suicide. And they just sort of said that they were keen to do a little bit more to speak out. I mean, suicide statistics are, if anything, going up. We know that they peaked. There was a particular surge of middle-aged men taking their own lives after the 2008 financial crash. And now with the cost of living crisis and all the fallout from the pandemic, there's real concern that we're going to see another spike. And very little has been done in terms of trying to meet government targets.
Oh, I think we have just lost Kerry there. But thank you for getting in touch today. Virginia says, why is reporting the negative result for Boris not the fact he won with almost 60% of the vote? Alex emailed to say, what annoys me is those MPs who voted against Boris Johnson are all just trying to save their own political careers in their constituencies. I guarantee you not a single one will resign their seat or cross the floor. I just want to go back to Kerry McCarthy because I want to ask a final question of her, and we've got her back. Kerry, you have this debate in Parliament.
Sorry?
You have this debate in Parliament tomorrow where you will get the chance to put your demands directly to the minister responsible. What is it that you're demanding in Parliament tomorrow?
My concern is that there's just a lot of soft talk around this. It's all about how people need to open up. They need to sort of ask people how they are and have a cup of tea with them. Whereas actually, as I said, mental health services are in crisis. So we've got people that are turning up because they can't get appointments for therapies or even GP appointments. They're turning up at A&E. So I actually want a very clear suicide prevention strategy from the minister that addresses people at the point where we know that they're at risk of harming themselves if action isn't taken. That would be my main ask from her, is that things that aren't tinkering around the margins, but a very clear strategy for helping people that really need it. And I think waiting lists is absolutely key to that.
Kerry McCarthy, Labour MP for Bristol East. It's your first time on the channel. You're very welcome. Thank you for telling us about why you're campaigning on suicide prevention. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
You have been listening or watching to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. Tomorrow, I'm here at 10 to 12 because it is Prime Minister's Question Times. I bet that's going to be a feisty one. Up next, it's On the Money with Liam Halligan, who is joining me now in the studio. Liam, what's coming up?
Well, it's wall-to-wall politics, isn't it, Gloria? And we're reflecting that on the money. We're talking about how the UK business community, what it thinks of this ongoing psychodrama at Westminster. When that vote of no confidence was called, it was only yesterday morning, so much has happened, then the pound got stronger because the markets felt, there's going to be some more certainty. But the result, of course, was very close.
Right.
So now the pound is falling. Stock markets don't like the uncertainty, and that increases the cost of living crisis because the pound gets stronger, imports get more expensive. So that's what we're discussing, how business leaders are reacting to this ongoing Westminster psychodrama.
Gosh, when will it all end? Do you think it will end? This psychodrama?
It's just a news tsunami, isn't it?
In 20 seconds. What's your prediction?
I think he'll last a few more months. Right. I think if I was advising him now, I'd say pretty much his only hope is to go for some really red-blooded tax-cutting policies, early general election, go out and beyond the MPs that don't like him, try and reach out to the silent majority of the country.
Thank you, Liam. As ever, more from Liam shortly. First, it is time for your weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Dry and bright for many of us today, but not for all. There will be some showers in the south. However, away from the showers, it's going to feel warm in many places. One area of low pressure is moving away. Another one is approaching for later in the day. A deeper one is approaching for later in the week to bring a windy spell Thursday, Friday and Saturday. But in the meantime, in between these lows, a lot of cloud for many, especially for southern parts of the country where we've started off with some light rain and drizzle, and another area of cloud feeding into eastern parts of northern England. But Scotland sees Plenty of sunny spells. Central parts of England also sunny spells, and where we get the sunshine, 22 Celsius is possible. Warm again also for western Scotland, but showers will form in places, and some more prolonged showery rain pushes in from the southwest through the evening. Now that spreads into Northern Ireland. Much of England and Wales sees a couple of hours of rain, heavy at times, before it pushes into central and southern Scotland by dawn. And the cloud and the rain will keep the temperatures up into the teens in many spots, but the far north of Scotland stays clear of the rain, and it will be a cooler start to the day here. Actually, the north of Scotland sees the best of the weather on Wednesday. Sunny spells and feeling warm in places, but slow-moving area of rain across central Scotland. A lot of low cloud here will make it feel on the cool side. Northern Ireland seeing some heavy showers. Northern England, slow-moving showers as well. Tricky driving conditions. Further south,